Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This will be my WandaVision episode 6 breakdown video. Spoilers, we will be talking about past episodes too and where the show could go from here. Alright, let's jump in. So the show starts with the classic 90s intro, very reminiscent of Malcolm in the Middle, and confirms our predictions that Pietro is actually the Pietro from the MCU and not from X-Men. Now, I still could be proved wrong about this, but his powers are very similar to Aaron Taylor Johnson's Quicksilver powers in Age of Ultron. We get the reveal that Wanda's iconic costume is actually an old Sokovian fortune teller, and we see Wanda confused about the memories Pietro had one Halloween when he mentions getting typhus, and Pietro says that Wanda's probably suppressing some of these memories. And I thought this was quite interesting because that's exactly what she's doing about the death of Pietro and Vision. We get the iconic comic book Vision costume, which he refers to as a Mexican wrestler. I found it quite funny that Vision didn't know any real Spanish words, considering he's a computer and would know every Spanish word there is. We see the tension between Wanda and Vision is still there after their argument in the previous episode. Vision doesn't tell Wanda about his neighborhood watch duty, causing even more tension, which then results in Pietro covering for Vision. I find it ironic that Westview has a neighborhood watch, considering literally nothing will happen because Wanda's controlling at least 90% of everything. We get more confirmation that Quicksilver we see is the Age of Ultron Quicksilver, as we see him taking Tommy out to go get a costume. Now, one question I have with this is, where did they get those costumes? They aren't normal Halloween costumes. They're so unique and specific, it just seems too odd. We don't, however, find out who's Billy is dressed as. His costume to us looks like the classic comic costume that Wiccan wears, but it won't be that for him, so who knows what he's dressed as. We get the return of the sword base with a look at the drone that was sent into Westview and armed with a missile aimed to kill Wanda. Now, there's a huge shift in demeanour from Tyler Haywood. He seems so angry about the whole situation, and there's a super tense scene between Monica and Tyler with him mentioning her history with Carol Danvers. Though I thought this was a bit weird, I feel like there's some further explaining to do with that story. He then goes on to talk about what it was like after Thanos snapped half of everything from existence, saying everyone who came back still has the luxury of optimism. He then goes on to tell Monica that she just doesn't have the stomach for the job and kicks Monica, Darcy, and Jimmy off of the sword base. In my opinion, Tyler Haywood's demeanour seems to have shifted to more of a villainous character, and I'm not too sure he'll survive the show unless he's hiding something pretty big. I think we'll find out soon, as we know Darcy sent an email to Jimmy before she was ultimately taken in by Wanda's hex. We get a really badass scene with Monica and Jimmy kicking the crap out of some sword guards and Darcy having no idea what was going to happen. I think it's good to see Jimmy having some fight scenes, really shows how much of a badass he actually is. So back in Westview, we see a street full of kids trick-or-treating, which I find super weird considering Vision mentioned in the last episode, where are the kids? Then the most important line, I think, of the episode is from Pietro, and he mentions unleash hell demon spawn to Billy and Tommy. Now this is huge. In the comics, Billy and Tommy are supposedly the children of Wanda and Vision, but actually they are the magical constructs created by Wanda's hex powers. Now in the comics, she used some of Mephisto's life essence to give her children souls. Now if you watch my last few videos, I've mentioned Mephisto a lot, and I think this guarantees he's part of the show. The line fits so well. Mephisto is literally the devil of the MCU, and Mephisto is an extremely powerful, immortal, demonic entity which possesses the ability used by manipulating the forces of magic. So when Pietro says unleash hell demon spawn, I'm confident he's referring to the fact that Billy and Tommy are actually the spawn of Mephisto. So the advert we get this time is Yo Magic. Now, this advert took me, a few watches to kind of understand the message it was putting across, and I actually think it's really dark. The message that it's trying to put across, because I think it's pointing out that Wanda's magic, it's eventually going to kill those stranded people on the outskirts of Westview. I think although they look fit and healthy inside of Westview, outside of Westview they won't be. Similar to how Vision looks alive and well inside of Westview, but outside of Westview, he just disintegrates. So I think comparing that to the advert, I think, he just deteriorates. And I know the MCU is going for a more darker tone in this phase, so maybe it's explaining that, Wanda isn't actually looking out for some people, and they're going to, turn out the way the person did in the advert. So back in Westview, we're with Wanda, Pietro, and the kids just outside the cinema as they're now having to return the candy that they stole. Now, I'm really confused about what time period we're in this episode because if you look in the background, at this point in time when they're outside the cinema, The Incredibles is on, which came out in 2004, but also Parent Trap is on as well, which came out in 1998. Which one is it? Where are we? What year is it? And I suppose it's worth to note that both these hold relevance to the show. Incredibles, a family full of superheroes, and then The Parent Trap because Wanda is literally keeping her kids trapped in Westview as they're not allowed past Ellis Avenue. Now, we hear Pietro say he's only there to do his part, come to town unexpected, create tension with the brother in law, stir up trouble with the Rugrats, and ultimately give you grief. Now, it's worth mentioning that in the last episode, we hear Monica Rambeau say that Wanda is feeling grief. Now, if Pietro is ultimately there to give Wanda grief, it'll be to do with Pietro's death. Now, the more Wanda realizes that Vision, Pietro, and the kids are only real in her reality, will probably make her implode. And I think that's exactly what Mephisto really wants. He's the conductor of the show, playing with Wanda's grief. Then we find out Pietro knows he was shot in the street, but mentions for no reason. Now, I find that quite strange considering he was saving Hawkeye and civilians. Something just doesn't add up there. He then mentions he heard Wanda calling him. We haven't seen that, and she didn't seem too familiar with what he said. So I think she didn't call him. I think it was either Agnes, Mephisto, or possibly even Doctor Strange. And we finally see Tommy with his super speed, just like in the comics. Again, it's pretty much exactly the same as Pietro's powers. And I found it super odd in that scene at that specific moment because if you look around, there's literally no one around. It's just them. And I think they're starting to show how big the town really is and that Wanda doesn't really have the whole town under her control. We then cut back to Jimmy, Darcy, and Monica, with Darcy breaking into the base's network in order to find the data they have on Westview, which then reveals that they had a breakthrough and they can identify the personnel within the town. Jimmy asks about the people on the outskirts because they're just not moving and wonders whether they're still alive. And I think this has something to do with the advert, as I mentioned before. I do think we're going to get a huge reveal at the end of the show of what the extent of Wanda's hex actually did with to the people within Westview. We then see Vision, having a look at what the outskirts of Westview is, walking into that really spooky X-File-esque cul-de-sac with literally nobody moving. Like, are they still breathing? You know what I mean? Like, do they eat? Because it doesn't look like they blink. And I kind of feel like the person who's in control of this, because I don't think it will be Wanda 100%. I think there's someone else that's also sort of in control. I think they want Vision to find them like that because I think they know that person will know that Vision will then want to see what's beyond of Westview. And as soon as Vision goes beyond Westview, he's not going to survive like we've seen in the show. So then the person in control knows that Wanda will do anything to keep Vision from dying, which is why she then extends her hex. And I think that's all the plan of the person who is manipulating Wanda. We then get the scene between Vision and Agnes, which is what we've seen a lot of that in the trailers. And, just when you think you know who Agnes is, we've said multiple times that we think it's this Agatha Harkness character. I don't know what it is about her, but she just seems so normal at that point. And the weird thing with Agnes is that, where Vision found her, he just literally seen that no one was moving in the cul-de-sac, not even blinking, not breathing, nothing. Yet he goes and sees Agnes in this car, and Agnes can still communicate with him. In fact, she's been driving. So has Agnes got some control over Wanda that allows her to, be a little bit more stronger-willed? Jimmy and Monica then go and pick up the aerospace engineer, who we still don't know, who this person is. I mentioned in one of my last videos that it could be Rhodey, but I am starting to doubt that. I just I feel like if it was Rhodey, we probably would have seen it earlier. So I kind of hope it's going to be a new character, maybe Mr. Fantastic, or it probably won't be Mr. Fantastic. It'll probably be Reed Richards before he becomes Mr. Fantastic. Monica's cells have actually started to change after she entered and then exited the hex. Now, this will probably result in her powers, just like in the comics. As in the comics, she had powers like energy manipulation and flight. She was also called Photon. Now, this is why I think Haywood has started to kind of shift his demeanor towards Monica. I think Haywood is bitter about the last 5 years he's had to endure, and it happened all because of superheroes. So we're back in Westview with Wanda and Pietro, and this scene kind of has them talking about, how has Wanda created Westview? She says she really just doesn't know how it's all happened, and that she felt so lonely when this started to unfold. And I kind of understand what she means because she watched Vision die twice. Her brother has died, and although it's been 5 years for some, it's probably only been about a month for her. We also get to see that horrific scene of Pietro with all the bullet holes in him, and we get the Vision scene that was unexpected. We get this scene that was unexpected, but I feel like there's more um, reason for why Vision looked the way he did. So it's deep, this theory, but when we saw Vision with his big hole in his head, Wanda had just completely lost control. She was so angry, and she threw Monica Rambeau out of Westview, and that's why we get to see Vision's appearance, because she didn't have a grip on the reality that she was in. But this time, I don't really get why we get to see dead Pietro. Now, it could be sadness because, she talked about how lonely she was and things like that. But my theory is that it's Mephisto, right, reminding Wanda that her brother's dead and that what she was seeing isn't actually real, reaffirming her loneliness so that when the time comes, she will consume, probably a larger portion of the world, allowing Mephisto control over that part. So in the final few scenes of the show, we're back with Sword, and we're seeing Darcy break through the firewall that Haywood's put up, and she actually manages to send the email to Jimmy Woo with the attachment. Now, they've had Vision for 5 years. It's for his eyes only. It's got to be something to do with Vision. And speaking of Vision, we finally get the scene where, he's on the edge of Westview, and he just goes straight through it. He just breaks out. We've seen it in a few trailers, and we finally get to see it. And I thought he actually looked all right for a bit, but then I watched it back, and it's actually his cape that's keeping him from fully, disintegrating. And then once his cape's out, that's when it goes all pear-shaped, or in this case, actually hexagon-shaped, because again, if you watch it back, the way that he breaks down in hexagon structures again. It's this running thing across the whole show that they need to explain. And as Vision's dying, Darcy runs out and ultimately gets herself handcuffed to one of the SUVs. And then we got our first look at Billy's powers, Wiccan, in the comics. And he tells Wanda that, Vision's in trouble and that he needs her help. Wanda, absolutely crazy, just completely takes out the whole sword base, turning them into clowns. And in consuming the sword base, she takes Darcy with her. And then the last scene of the episode, we see Wanda opening her eyes as she's just consumed a larger portion of New Jersey. Alright guys, if you like the video, please just give it a thumbs up, and please subscribe for more TV and film.